Deace. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV. I'm radio and podcast. I'm Steve Deace. He's Todd Erzin. He's Aaron McIntyre. So yesterday I wore the Superman shirt. Today I have the Clark Kent glasses. That is not on purpose. My actual glasses broke yesterday, so I had to just go grab these readers at Walgreens just to tide me over until the glasses are replaced. So the good news is I can see everything other than what I need to see the most. Words on a page, words on a screen.
Well, why don't you just take them off and do the opposite? See what you need to see the most, but not see everything.
Because I need progressive lenses, so I can't. Both of them, both far and near, for me. Like you're
screwed no matter what.
Yeah, I am. I mean, in general, and if you listen to the show, you know that. That's kind of just my MO. But yes. So I thought about that and then realized, well, I'm one step away from being Harry Carey here. All right, with the Coke bottle bifocal glasses. So I think I might just bite the bullet and do the LASIK. And I'm told I'll still perhaps need to use readers, even if I get LASIK. But at least then I'd only be down to like one problem. You know what I'm saying?
Don't do LASIK. Man.
Don't do LASIK.
Don't do LASIK.
All right, now you're telling me not to.
Yeah. These BCGs are better than LASIK. Just the risks of LASIK, I've heard.
Okay.
Not good.
Basically, just getting old sucks. I mean, you're screwed. All right, there's nothing. You know what? The death rate does remain 100%, as I often say.
Todd, do you know what I'm talking about, or am I just making
No,
this
I've
up?
heard that as well. I've heard this. But you're healthier now than you've been in your whole life.
That is ironically true.
Yeah.
I am actually healthier now, except for the aging process. I've got about an ear and a half. My right ear, I can hear everything out of my right ear now since the initial infection, except what I need to hear the most, which is voice recognition. So I hear every other sound except that which I need to hear the most. All right. With these readers, I'm seeing everything just fine, except for what I actually need to do this job to see the most.
Just another season of life, brother.
Indeed. I mean, and speaking of The Last Stand, because I kind of feel like I'm on that right now, as I watch my body slowly wither away as time goes on. Hey, I'm going to be out in California here in about a month in Southern California. I'm going to join a stacked lineup of speakers, including Riley Gaines, Pastor Jack Hibbs, both of whom have been on the show more than once, and many, many more for Seth Gruber's outstanding The Last Stand conference. This is more than just a Christian event. It's a clarion call for those of us who understand the signs of the times and see the writing on the wall. You're going to have powerful worship from powerful artists like 10 Avenue North and more. Unfiltered truth, no platitudes, just real answers, real worship, courage to live like Christ, no matter the cost. If this sounds like an event you would like to attend, you want to say hello to me while I'm out there speaking, use my code DACE10. Code DACE10 for thelaststand.com. Code DACE10 for a discounted ticket. And you can bring your church, your kids, your doubts, but make sure you leave that fear at the door, folks, because we're going to rid you of that by the time this weekend is over. All right, code DACE10 for thelaststand.com to get your tickets today. Code DACE10 for the discounted tickets at thelaststand.com. All right, coming up on today's show at the bottom of the hour, we don't do a lot of this, but every now and then, it's just the partners that we are aligned with here on our show, what they are doing in terms of the services they provide that we promote crosses over directly into what is happening in the news right now. So we're going to bring on one of the advisors from Constitution Wealth here at the bottom of this hour, because there's a lot of questions about where the country and stuff is heading economically. I mean, just a few months ago, I think it was JP Morgan was telling investors, prepare for a recession later in the year. And now they're not. That's a kind of a big deal. You know, those things kind of matter a lot, you know? And so, because when JP Morgan tells you to prepare for a recession, there may be some things that maybe some risks you're thinking of taking, you don't. Some investments you're thinking of making that you don't, right? Okay. There might be some commodities that you think you're going to go ahead and align with that you don't. And then when they say, psych, maybe we are actually more optimistic than we thought. there's just a lot of uncertainty out there. So we're going to try to walk people through as much of this as we possibly can so that we can be good, godly stewards. Amen. So we're going to do that at the bottom of the hour. Next hour, we're going to pick up our study. We don't think you guys are naming another pope, right? You're good for a bit, you think?
I think we're good.
All right. So we never did get to the book of Romans last week because we were literally interrupted by Rome. So this week, I think we're going to actually be able to get to the book, all right, and resume our study of Paul's letter to the church in Rome. We'll get to that in the next hour of the show. But before we get to all of that, let's get to Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Birthright Citizenship. The Supreme Court is hearing oral arguments today on a challenge to President Donald Trump's efforts to end birthright citizenship, and crucially, whether lower courts that have blocked Trump's policies from taking force nationwide have acted beyond their authority. The Supreme Court arguments are focusing on lower court judges in Maryland, Massachusetts, and Washington state who issued universal injunctions against Trump's birthright citizenship executive order earlier this year. The Trump administration asked the Supreme Court in March to intervene and limit the scope of 3 lower court rulings to cover only individuals directly impacted by the relevant courts. President Trump continued his Middle East tour this morning in the United Arab Emirates. During yesterday's meetings in Qatar, Trump reacted to the news that Vladimir Putin isn't showing up to talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, after all, in Turkey today.
Are you disappointed by that? No, I didn't anticipate. I actually said, why would he go if I'm not going? Because I wasn't going to go. I wasn't planning to go. I would go, but I wasn't planning to go. And I said, I don't think he's going to go if I don't go. And that turned out to be right. But we have people there. Marco, as you know, is doing a fantastic job. Marco's there, Secretary of State, and we have people there. But I didn't think it was possible for Putin to go if I'm not there.
Back at home, Ben Cohen, co-founder of Ben & Jerry's Ice Cream, disrupted testimony from RFK Jr. in front of the House hearing.
Be permitted. While the committee conducts its business, Capitol Police are asked to remove the individuals.
HHS Secretary RFK Jr. also clapped back at the purple-haired Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro.
38% of our youth now are diabetic or pre-diabetic. That was 0 when I was a kid. Anybody thinks that we did gold standard medicine in this country from these institutions, look at our children. They're the sickest children in the world. Laura, you say that excuse me, Congressman DeLauro, you say that you've worked for 20 years on getting food dye out. Give me credit. I got it out in 100 days.
I'll give you that credit.
All right, so let's work together and do something that we all believe in, which is have healthy kids in our country, for God's sake.
At that same hearing, RFK Jr. also revealed there are around 8 million people in this country who receive Medicaid benefits who are not eligible. Illegal aliens taking Medicaid in 2 different states and so on. Congressman Chip Roy says the crucial thing he's fighting for is to reform these entitlements.
All we're talking about, to Ron John's point, Senator Ron Johnson, is $150 billion a year in savings in this bill out of a $7 trillion spend for your government. 10 years ago, our total spend was $3.6 trillion. Today, it is $7 trillion. We're already talking about crumbs, Will. If you want to save this country for our kids and grandkids, we're staring at $36 trillion in debt. It'll be $56 trillion, even if I get everything I want. So I've got to go fight to reform Medicaid so we can stop funding the able-bodied, stop the blue state money laundering, and restore fiscal sanity for the American people. If we do that, Trump will have the greatest economy ever. The SALT guys can get what they want. We can reform Medicaid. More vulnerable will be protected. There'll be more health care freedom, and we will reduce the deficit. That's a win for everybody if we'll just do it.
Michigan Congressman Sri Thenadar, who is attempting to impeach President Trump, can't answer basic questions about his own district.
I don't know. What are the 5 Grosse Pointe cities? Well, look, I'm not here to answer a quiz.
On the topic of immigration, border czar Tom Homan says people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are walking, talking jokes.
I was enforcing it. I was wearing a green uniform, Border Patrol agent, for 5 years before she was even born. I had more than 3 decades enforcing immigration law before she became a member of Congress. I worked for 6 presidents. I've seen policies. I've seen hundreds of policies. Some worked, some didn't. But you can't deny the success of the Trump administration when it comes to border security. Again, the most secure border in history of this nation. And I said from day one, and she knows this. You can not support ICE. Shame on you. You can support sanctuary cities. Shame on you. But you can't cross the line. You can't knowingly impede ICE law enforcement officers. That is a felony. You can't harbor and conceal, knowingly harbor and conceal an illegal alien from ICE. That is a felony. And you certainly can't commit criminal trespass. You know, and as far as New York, her district, this administration has done more to protect her district than she has. The number of criminal aliens we took off the streets of New York made her community much safer. She ought to be thanking the members of this administration, the men and women of ICE, who protect this country and make her community safer. So, you know, it's politics over public safety. It's just ridiculous. She ought to love her community more than she hates Trump.
A new poll from the Associated Press shows that 6 months after President Trump's victory in November, Democrats remain deeply pessimistic about the future of the party. The poll found only about 1/3 of Democrats are very optimistic or even somewhat optimistic about their party's future. That's down sharply from July of 2024, when about 6 in 10 said the same thing. In completely unrelated news, House Speaker Mike Johnson has canceled votes tomorrow over the big, beautiful bill because around a dozen in his own caucus say the bill doesn't cut spending enough, and another half dozen or so say it doesn't spend enough. And that's what happened while we were away.
Yes. Yeah. Aaron's Rundown brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. If you're struggling with chronic pain that you think will just never go away, it might. I mean, listen, I'm sitting here with Walgreens readers because without them, I literally would be blind as a Tiberian bat. And 3 people probably got that Star Trek reference. So anyway, that might be the case. But it also might be true that maybe you gave up before you found the right solution for you. And that right solution, no guarantees, but it could be Relief Factor. Over the years, about 1 million people have tried Relief Factor's 3-week quick start. 70% of them saw such good results in 3 weeks or less that they stuck with the product long term. It's a drug-free supplement created by doctors, though, who can prescribe drugs. But they wanted to go after the, not just mask pain, but go after the inflammation that's likely the cause of it because it's got too much of that in your joints. And that's what Relief Factor seeks to relieve you of. Maybe it's what you've been waiting for. Maybe it's not, but you know, it's just $20 to see if you don't see a difference in your pain in 3 weeks or less. If you want to try the 3-week quick start at relieffactor.com, that's relieffactor.com, or go to the number 800-4RELIEF at relieffactor.com. Quick follow-up because this hearing is going on right now. At the Supreme Court over birthright citizenship and these universal injunctions. Quote just within the last hour from Justice Clarence Thomas, quote, "How did we survive until the 1960s as a republic without universal injunctions?" End quote.
It's pretty much the mic drop. Are we done here?
Yeah. I mean, how'd we do this? Exactly. All right. So here's the thing. You guys are very aware of this, but we've talked about this before, but let me reset this, all right? Just because you have a child on the soil called the United States of America does not mean that child is a U.S. citizen. And it has really never meant that since the founding of this republic until about 30 to 40 years ago. And this is why, just to use the example I've been using on this show for 10 plus years now. This is why when the French ambassador, his wife, who's a French citizen, but she's pregnant over there at the French embassy, and the contractions start, and they take her to the hospital there, and she has the child on U.S. soil. This is why the child is not an American citizen, because he is subject to the jurisdiction of the government of France. And that language is actually right there in the very 14th Amendment. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That language is right there. Whose country are you the jurisdictional subject of? Those amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, were ratified basically as a package together during Reconstruction as an attempt to head off attempts by the South to circumvent abolition of slavery. All right? And the question then became, well, we should just go ahead and, deport all these black folks because we'll just treat them as they're not lawful citizens. Nope. We brought them here. under the jurisdiction. We brought them here on the slave ships under the jurisdiction and authority of the United States government. The United States government imported them in chattel slavery. So under whose jurisdiction did the slaves jump on the slave ships themselves, right? Did they say, hey, slave ship, chattel slavery, hold on? All right. Did they paddle out to the ships? Did they jump on the ships themselves? No, they were brought here under the jurisdiction and authority of the United States government, correct? Mm-hmm. They viewed them as an import. So therefore, them and their family members are under the jurisdiction of which government at that point then? Ours. And therefore, the children that they would have moving forward, therefore, would also be subject to the jurisdiction of whom? Ours. Us. Yes. The idea of, I can invade your country. I mean, just imagine. Maybe the Japs should have put like pregnant pilots in the planes at Pearl Harbor. They could have just landed instead, and gone into labor and just, plopped out a bunch of kids, and they're now Americans. Yeah. It's just preposterous, folks.
Yeah, I was just asking Grok, if a British woman flying over international waters has a baby.
Yeah.
The baby is a citizen of Britain. The baby comes an hour later after landing at Newark. The baby is automatically an American citizen. It doesn't make sense. And it never did.
It never did, because it's not how the system was supposed to work. Subject to the jurisdiction thereof. What country are you here from? And under whose jurisdiction and authority and consent are you here? That language is right there in the Constitution. And it always has been. And in fact, there were concerns about these amendments. And the Michigan senator, who was one of the key authors of that 14th Amendment, when they quizzed him about it, Jacob, I can't remember Jacob's last name, but when they quizzed, I think it's Jacob Howard. When they quizzed Senator Jacob, I believe your last name was Howard, all right? Right there in the ratification testimony, he was like incredulous that this could be interpreted later on to mean people can invade the country and just drop a kid and now the invaders are the citizens. He's like, no, that's why we put the language in there, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That's what it means. That's pretty plain language.
And your memory's still pretty good, because
it is Jacob Howard?
Yeah.
All right, so the Father Time hasn't come from my memory yet?
Not yet.
He's coming for everything else, though. And he's like, I'm coming for that too, Deace. Batten down the hatches, brother. All right. That clip from Tom Homan, holy cow. Holy cow. I mean, that's not a rebuttal, man. That is a dissection. And it ties directly into that AP poll result of why Democrats are so negative about the future of their party. And this has gone on, basically, the Democratic Party post Summer of Love has been in an evolution from a pro-immigrant, pro-labor, blue-collar party that was still fairly patriotic, centrist on moral issues, center-right on moral issues, center-left on economic issues. Some may argue kind of what Donald Trump is right now. All right. Centrist or center-left on economic issues, centrist or center-right on the moral social issues, which next to the Democrats, of course, makes him look like he's a John Birch Society member, right? Okay. From the Summer of Love on, the boomer generation has transformed the Democratic Party into a liberal pro-America party, into a leftist globalist party. And I used to do the joke, that the Democrats used to be the party of the government should permit you to do the things that God says are dumb and immoral. And now they're the leftist party that wants government to make you do them. You're compelled to do them now. Okay? And what we've seen really since this evolution was completed with the nomination of George McGovern in 1972, that the Democrats do not win presidential elections without a compelling, charismatic figure. Shall we use Tim Walz's recent term, a permission structure? Someone whose personality and charisma, charm, gives normie America permission to vote for things that they on their own, just in a straight up referendum, would probably not consent to. Fair?
Yeah.
So that's why if you look at when Democrats lack clearly the most. Why have I said for my entire career, when elections are about personalities, who wins?
Democrats.
And when they're about issues, who wins?
Republicans.
When the Democrats were considered to have the more compelling personality in a presidential election, Carter compared the young Jimmy Carter, not the Carter we see post 1980, but you have to look at Jimmy Carter as he was portrayed in 1976, the young Southern governor, naval officer, okay, versus Gerald Ford, who was the very first. I mean, Saturday Night Live was birthed in Gerald Ford mockery. That was the first. That was when Chevy Chase became a star. A household star in America mocking Gerald Ford, the unelected president post Watergate. So Jimmy Carter was the compelling figure in that race. Since then, if they don't have the most compelling charismatic figure, then the race they don't win. Bill Clinton next to George H.W. Bush, the most compelling, charismatic personality. Bill Clinton next to I'm Bob Dole, and you need to know I'm Bob Dole. And here Bob Dole is going to Bob Dole, and we're going to Bob Dole till we Bob Dole, was the most charismatic, compelling personality. Barack Obama next to the maverick, John McCain, getting mavericky, the more compelling personality. Mitt Romney, I didn't have to continue that line of conversation. Mitt Romney's like personality, what is it? Okay, so they need that. They have to have that as a figurehead. Without that, the American people, even in our declining state as a civilization, does not buy what they are selling. They don't have that person right now. That person's not even really on the horizon right now. That person is not even on the horizon right now. Like I couldn't come up with someone I could say right now. If I tried, the closest would be that young governor of Maryland whose name I don't remember, who just got elected. It's not Jasmine Crockett, folks. It's not Ocasio-Cortez. And you just saw Tom Homan just completely dissect her. I mean, she couldn't stand up to one cross-examination from J.D. Vance on a national debate stage.
No, wait a second. Isn't Pete Buttigieg bending over backwards to prove you wrong right now?
Yes.
Do you see what I did there?
I did.
Are you proud?
That's why I stopped you. He is. If there's one thing Pete Buttigieg is doing, it is bending over backwards. I can promise you that. Yes. Now, here's the problem for us, though. That doesn't matter next year in a midterm election, when people don't vote on personalities by and large, but they vote on what they think is the direction of the country and whether they like it or not. So if you are a despondent Democrat right now and you are looking at your roster and you're thinking, I don't see a Bubba there, man. I don't see a hope and change agent there. I don't even know who's even on the horizon in the next few years. I bring you glad tidings of great joy. Because we have these other elections not known as presidential elections in the in-between years, and they are called midterms. And a lot of times, those aren't determined by personality. Barack Obama won 2 presidential elections. He got mollywopped in the 2 midterm elections during his presidency. Democrats got absolutely mollywopped in both 2010 and 2014. Bill Clinton lost both of his midterm elections. In 1994, the Republican takeover, and then even after trying to impeach him in 98, Republicans still held on to majorities in Congress. After the government, you guys have all been told that we shut the government down in 95, and Republicans never won again. They won the very next midterm election, guys. They won the very next one. So you guys have all been lied to about that for 35 years from people like Mitch McConnell who just hate your guts. Okay. Yeah, that didn't happen, actually. Reagan lost 2 midterm elections. He lost the House in 82, lost the Senate in 86. So we have these things called midterm elections. Trump gave up 40 House seats. Lost 40 House seats in 2018, and then, I would argue, did get reelected in 2020. At the very least, had it stolen from him by the most razor-thin possible margin you could have in a national election. So if you are a despondent Democrat, I bring you glad tidings of great joy, and it is called the Republican Congress. I mean, it is doing everything it can possibly do. Because I won't lie to y'all, okay? Against the Tom Homans and Caroline Levitts of the world, you guys are screwed. Okay, I'm just gonna tell you, right? Just completely screwed. You got no chance, no hope. You have no one that could stand toe to toe with these kinds. And I didn't even bring up probably the 2 best messengers in this operation, and Stephen Miller and J.D. Vance. I mean, you guys are just like way out of your league. All right. That is a bludgeoning. That's a National Geographic special. Save the baby seals, and you all are the seals. Okay. And JD and Miller and those guys, they're the clubs. So I'm going to lie to you about that. All right. You are in some deep shinola where that is concerned. However, there's always a silver lining. Okay. And this Republican Congress is just doing whatever it can possibly do to make sure that normies vote for you all again next year out of just sheer spite. It's doing everything it can do.
What if when we went to D.C., instead of going to the White House and that uplifting feeling had, what if we spent all that time in the Capitol?
I'd get arrested. We would have gotten arrested. Okay, arrested. All right. I mean, Aaron.
Low,
yes. I'd have been doing Negro spirituals. All right. Aaron would have gotten arrested, and you'd have been like waving the incense. Bring out your dead. Bring out your dead. All right. That's what would have happened. That is a place where hope goes to die, to never return. I mean, we can't vote on Friday. By the way, we shouldn't get so hard on the Mike Johnson for canceling votes on Fridays, because folks, they're not really voting any of the other days of the week either. All right, so might as well just take the day off and make it official. This is, I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to say. And man, you watch what RFK Jr. did in that committee hearing yesterday with like one vocal cord, like one chord. Okay. He's got half a chord of vocals. All right. Just, and by the way, a guy who sells 1,400 calorie pints of ice cream wants to interrupt a conversation about healthy lifestyles. Gotta love communists, right? I mean, have you ever looked at the back of Ben & Jerry's? Those communists make some great ice cream, by the way. You ever looked at the back? I'm telling you straight up, that pint is like 1,400 calories. Straight up, a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream is like 1,400 calories, right? Like 60 grams of sugar, okay? I mean, RFK Jr. just decimated them yesterday. And now, I mean, and they're cornered into we're the party of keep everybody sick, dead, aborted, gay, communist, transed, and broke. Okay.
But they're proud of that.
But see, it's funny you should say that. They've been that party actually pretty much post Bill Clinton. That's who they've been. All right. That's who they've been. But they've been actually and effectively, quite frankly, but not anymore. And able to do that with a compelling personality like Barack Obama, who is here to absolve you of the inherent racism you were never guilty of course. Yes. But that's all gone now. Right. And so there's nothing for Congresswoman DeLorio to do other than purplize her hair. There's nothing left to do. OK, I mean, that they're cornered. But the Republican congressmen are the jailer, and they have brought the keys to let you out of your cells. And they are, it's very clear, very hell-bent on doing so. And I'm just going to tell you guys right now, I didn't get permission to say this. I'm going to tell you right now. Chip and a few others are never voting for this big, beautiful bill under its current structure. I'm just telling you from the private conversations we've had, never happening. And there will be no amount of strong arming from Trump or anybody else to get him to do it. There's going to have to be some form of substantive reform of something before they vote. They're just not going to do it. They didn't. Chip Roy did not beat cancer and is not spending time away from his teenage son that he could be at home golfing with to vote for $56 trillion in debt in Washington, D.C. He doesn't want to be there that bad. Doesn't care if he's ever there again, and if he's there again next week. All right. So, I mean, that's just White House. Everybody's going to have to come up with something that is going to satisfy that small group of people. See, everybody's concerned about what the Main Street rhinos are going to do. Y'all better check your right flank. So if there's anybody at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, I'm just maybe sending you we were doing the colored smoke last week. I'm sending you some black smoke this week. Okay. Because I'm just telling you right now, I know several people in that group, including the guy who's the biggest face of them all. He's one of the best buddies I have. I'm just telling you right now, not happening. And having Susan B. Anthony List or somebody like that call and pressure them, because if you vote for $56 trillion in debt, we'll finally defund Obama, or I'm sorry, Freudian slip. We'll finally defund Planned Parenthood. Ain't gonna work. Won't work. You're gonna have to come up with something for those folks, because him and Massey and a few of those guys, they just don't want to be there so bad that they want part of their lasting legacy to be they signed off on $56 trillion in debt to come up with something that the Main Street Caucus would support. So you better think of something. So I've got two questions for you folks. Are you knowingly or unknowingly funding the destruction of American values with every investment you make? Do you know if your hard-earned investment dollars are being used against the Trump administration's agenda, threatening the very fabric of our country? You know, your investment should work as hard as you do. They should align with your beliefs. Many investors don't realize they have the power to influence corporate policies through shareholder proxy voting and strategic investment choices. That's why you want to trust the team at Constitution Wealth. I trust them. I think you should too. They understand what matters to patriots like us. Well, we can build the parallel economy together by working with an investment firm made up of professionals who share our values. So if you joined the movement of Americans who are using their investments to hold companies accountable for their ethical behavior, do that now and take control of the future of America. Do not get complacent. Visit constitutionwealth.com/blaze for a free consultation. That's constitutionwealth.com/blaze. And Constitution Wealth is a registered investment advisor. You should review their disclosures at constitutionwealth.com to understand their services and fees. And remember that all investing involves risk, including the risk of loss. I am a client of the firm, and this is a paid endorsement, but my opinions are my own. And by the way, if you're watching there on Blaze TV, you can scan the QR code right there on your screen. All right, speaking of Constitution Wealth, let's talk to Morgan Smith from Constitution Wealth, because there is still a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace right now on various fronts. So we want to help you guys be as good of stewards as possible, get the most wise counsel that we can possibly grant you. So Morgan, it's good to meet you and good to have you here on the show with us on the Blaze, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. And I was in the waiting room listening to your show. I was just reminded I need to start my day off listening to Steve Deace show a little more.
Oh, well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Was insightful, and he had me laughing.
Thank you.
Put a smile on the face. Also, I wanted to thank you in your show. We were looking at our clients and our numbers. About 40% of our investment assets is due to your listeners coming to Constitution Wealth. So that says a lot about your listeners, the trust they have in you, and we really appreciate that.
Well,
so thanks.
That's excellent, and I know you guys will honor their trust, man. So that's a good partnership right there, for real. And hey, we try to make the managed destruction of Western civilization as humorous as we possibly can on the way out the door, right? Okay.
Well, I'm going to say you succeeded with me this morning for sure.
But let's get serious right now. We have one of the leading investment houses in America was forecasting recession at the start of the year. They just removed that forecast this week. I mean, that's a pretty big sway in outlook. We're not even to the halfway point of the year. In my neighborhood, I've got now 3 for sale signs in my direct neighborhood. That's like 3 more than I've seen in a minute, in our neighborhood. Yet interest rates are still about 126% higher than they were at this time in 2021 when Joe Biden was just beginning to dismantle America at that particular point in time. So there's still a lot of dichotomy out there, Morgan. I don't even know where to begin. Just give us a baseline of where you think things are economically for the average American right now.
Well, look at there's no question. There's a lot of things going on right now. And here's the interesting aspect about investing in the economy and the world. There's always something going on. There's always uncertainty. There's always opportunities. And there's always the media telling us about maybe bad things are going to happen and good things are going to happen. So what we really think is don't worry about the headlines. Focus on a strategic investment plan that historically has given you a high probability of making it through any kind of economic global situation. And we take it to the next level. And that's really, let's not only do that, let's align your investment strategy and your personal financial life, which is very personal to a lot of people. It's your legacy with your family. Let's align that with your conservative values. So don't don't worry too much about what's happening in the short term. Have a strategic plan and align that with your personal values, which is what we're here for. And we just felt like there was a lot of conservative folks out there, faith-based, family-based, who were looking at their financial lives and weren't implementing a strategic plan to make it through these difficult times that were aligned with their values. So that's what I would say.
What were you guys telling clients in light of the tariff war that Trump launched about a month ago, which caused social media meltdowns, and the markets did initially melt down. Much of that meltdown was recovered within like 24 hours, and now that we're signing deals with the UK, the provisional deal, it's a 90-day deal, I believe, that was just agreed to with China, for example. Now you're seeing these markets really rebound. So when there is that kind of a situation where maybe even the guy you voted for, frankly, Morgan, is engaged in a form of disruption because he thinks it's good for the long-term benefit of the American people, but it may not be good, frankly, for some of the short-term benefits of some of your own clients, right? So what happens in that kind of a situation where political expediency and your values maybe don't necessarily align at that point? How did you counsel people through that moment?
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes sowing chaos out there in the world might be a negotiating tactic, and that's what sometimes you need to remember. But really, when we're looking at scenarios and when clients come to us with questions, all that, we don't try and read the tea leaves and try and say, okay, we think we know what's going to happen, because nobody can predict the future. We look to history. And actually, there was a good study out by a firm called Dimensional Fund Advisors. And they said, there was a previous period where tariffs were implemented, and that was actually Trump's first presidency, his first term there. And as a matter of fact, China's return in the stock market was a positive return. And so when clients come to us and say, hey, look, here's a situation, I'm worried about it, or I'm overly exuberant about it, let's kind of focus there. We bring them back to ground. We look at history and we say, look, this is unique, but it's not. Things like this have always happened. Let's build that strategic plan that's going to be successful and maximize your wealth over time. And it's going to be resilient through these time periods, as opposed to analyzing specific tariffs and economies and things like that. Because really, the stock market is the most resilient and fast-acting, I'd say, ecosystem, not natural. It's a man-made ecosystem, and there are hundreds of billions of trades going on any day, and you just can't keep up with it. And it's going to respond and find opportunities and peel off some areas that maybe weren't as opportunistic as they thought. So I guess long story short is, my counsel is, again, build a strategic plan. Align it with your values. It's your family, it's your legacy, and monitor that. Make sure it's tax efficient, but don't be reacting to the headlines.
Who's likely to be more successful in your world? The person who is able to crystal ball something in an instant and capitalize on that, or the person that has, as you said, a strategic plan, a set of values, and over the course of the long haul, just doesn't panic and just sticks largely to that structure. Obviously, you've got factors beyond your control that at times you may have to amend aspects of it, but the premise of it remains the same. What's more likely to be successful in your world?
Well, again, we look at historical studies, and this historical study says the majority of those individuals or professionals who are trying to predict the future, over time, they tend to underperform just what the market has to offer. Mm-hmm. So most definitely, our advice for long-term investing is build a portfolio of indexes that's globally diversified. And you brought up a really good point. There are things you can't control and you can't control, right? So we can't control when the market's going to give you those returns and what the cycles are going to be. What we can control is certain factors in your portfolio, some tax efficiency that we can put in there, some tilting towards certain dimensions and factors that we like to look at that have a probability of giving you a higher return than the market. But again, with our value proposition, that's the expertise we brought in this into Constitution Wealth. And then the issue was, okay, how do you translate that science of investing that we've had a lot of experience on and tilt it towards faith-based family values and make sure that happens in just a high level of a fiduciary environment?
Let's discuss a potential X factor that may be something that causes you to reevaluate your process.
Sure.
The BRICS nations and their effort to replace the dollar as the default currency here in the U.S. I mean, I think we both would agree that the current administration would put up way more of a stingy and ornery fight over such a thing than the previous one would. But they're still meeting here in a couple of months. They're still posturing, right? Putin still didn't show up today in Turkey to meet with Zelensky. He still didn't show up for that meeting. All right. So there are still some posturing and things going on there. If something like that were to happen, how much of an external factor would that be to cause you guys to recommend investors reevaluate their process? How concerned about that are you?
No, are you specifically talking about maybe the strength of the U.S. dollar and currency? Is that what you're alluding to?
Yeah, and the nations, it's Russia and a few of the rest of them that are getting together in an effort to replace the another currency as for the dollar as the global currency, the default currency.
Yeah. So to me, there's two factors of that. One is we've seen this discussion many times in the previous years. You know, America's over. We've actually, during the 2008 financial crisis, you know, there were some folks saying capitalism is dead and you can't invest in the stock market. And if you look at really, there's two things you can look at: GDP, and you can look at the market cap value of an economy. So when you look at the overall stock market and the value of that stock market within the U.S. compared to the rest of the world, the U.S. still is more than 50% of the wealth of the global stock markets. So there's going to be a long road to go and a long path before I believe that the U.S. currency is not going to hold much value. The other thing I would just say is that really when you look at portfolio and these types of things, the economy and stocks react differently than what you think they would. For example, during the pandemic, everyone was saying, oh, there's all this opportunity, the world's going to change, there's opportunities going out the window. But we found that certain companies found a lot of opportunity and created a lot of wealth. So even though it seems like there's bad news that's going to happen, there's going to be new opportunities that arise. And if you hold that basket of stocks, you as an investor are going to benefit from that. The other flip side of the coin is you asked, when do you make changes? One is, you can think about some changes based on what's going out there globally. But really, you want to focus on what's going on personally with you, on how you make changes and when you want to make changes to the portfolio. Either from a financial standpoint, you're going to retire, you want to leave money to your kids, you're looking at your trusts, or in our case, it's like you've said, you know what, I'm tired of investing in companies that don't like me. And I want to align my investment life and my investment strategy with my values. That's the type of investor that we felt for many, many years has been underserved or almost not served. We're filling the void for.
Final thing I want to ask you about, I got about 2 minutes here. The debt issue. All right. One of my buddies is Congressman Chip Roy, and he's causing quite the furor because he's trying to cut us down to 36 trillion in debt. 36 trillion in debt. Latest numbers I saw is our current debt to GDP ratio is well over 120%.
Steve, can you hear me?
Yep. Did we lose Morgan?
Well, everything looks fine from my end.
Yeah. Morgan, do we have you? Nope. I think we lost Morgan.
Must have.
All right. Well, we were towards the end anyway, so sorry about that there with our friends over at Constitution Wealth. What I was going to bring up is we're sitting at debt to GDP of well over 120%.
I'm with you, Steve. I lost you for a moment.
He's back. All right.
Sorry about that.
All right, that's all right. So now I've got about 90 seconds for a really hard question.
Okay.
All right.
I'm with you.
We're sitting at over 120% debt to GDP right now as we speak. All right. There's going to be a massive fight in Congress this summer about even trying to get down to $36 trillion in debt. How concerned about the debt threshold in America right now are you guys?
I am concerned about it. Look, we've got to have a good, when I talk to families about budgeting, it's let's keep your budget under control. And as soon as we get to a point where it looks like the credit agencies globally are going to downgrade the U.S. government, I think that's where the rubber meets the road. So, but at the end of the day, again, we need to vote out there, and I know you profess that a lot, and that's why at Constitution Wealth, with our investors, we want, not only are we aligning their investments with their values, their faith-based family values, but we're helping vote out there for proxy voting for what corporations are doing. And the more we can get together and do that, the more we can affect kind of the policies and some of the dangers out there that you're talking about.
Thank you, Morgan. Good to see you. And appreciate you guys do there at Constitution Wealth. Folks, you can check them out at constitutionwealth.com/blaze. That's constitutionwealth.com/blaze. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Steve. Have a great day.
You bet. Take care. A decade ago, our total, when you guys came to work for me a decade ago, our total national debt was $18.8 trillion. And we were losing our damn minds.
Yeah, we had a debt clock back then.
We did. We're now talking about $56 trillion by the end of this year.
That's why you can just sense from Chip, help me, help you. Like, what he's asking for is not calculus. It's just algebra. And everybody looks at him like he's a Jehovah's Witness or something. It's bizarre.
I mean, if we can't get by on $36 trillion in debt, which is what Chip is asking for, then
we're too comfortable, brother.
What are we doing here if we can't get by on that? What are we doing here if $36 trillion in debt? Trillion.
I often ask, both Republicans and Democrats, do they not know this? Are they ignorant of this fact of the national debt? And then I heard RFK Jr. tell that purple-haired congresswoman, you've been trying to ban dyes for 20 years, and I did it in 100 days. What the hell is wrong with you? And then I'm reminded, they really don't know and they don't care.
That's 12 zeros. A trillion is 12 zeros. 12. Theology Thursday is next. And we are back with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Todd Hers and Aaron McIntyre and all of you. And you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing us, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, on MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Don't forget to please subscribe to our new YouTube channel at Deace Show on YouTube. Again, that's at Deace Show on YouTube. And then finally, if you are a podcast listener, thank you so very much. You're a big part of our audience. If you haven't done this yet, leave us a 5-star review if you like the show, of course. And thanks to all of you who have. You can also make sure to hit subscribe, or if you're on Apple iTunes, follow, click on those buttons. And that makes sure that every time we do a new episode, it's in your podcast feed every single time, so you never miss us. And we appreciate all of you that have done that too. So thank you. And thanks to our friends over at Jace Medical. I've talked a lot about Jace cases over the last couple of years on the show. If you didn't know, it's an emergency set of prescription antibiotics shipped directly to you, so you can have them on hand before you need it. But they've just launched a brand new version that's twice the amount of meds and only $20 more, and it makes it the most comprehensive and best emergency medication kit currently on the market. I think it's something everyone should have. You never know when you might need them. You never know when the government might say, hey, you can't have them, even though they are helpful, because we haven't lived through anything like that recently, have we? So shortages, supply chain delays, natural disasters, government tyranny. All right. Enter promo code DACE at checkout for a discount on your order. That's promo code DEACE at jace.com. Jace.com is where you want to go to get your Jace case, and use the promo code DACE at checkout, my last name, for a discount on your order. Promo code DACE at jace.com. All righty. Are we ready for some Theology Thursday?
You bet.
We sure are.
We are in still one of my all-time favorite chapters in all of the scriptures, chapter 8 of Paul's letter to Rome. And we've been talking a lot about what it means to live in the Spirit, which means to live in communion with God. What it means to live in the flesh. In other words, to live in rebellion to God. All right? And he's going to bring home that portion of this chapter with the verses here, 12 through 17, that we're going to start with today, and then we'll see where it goes, because I kind of think they're one block together. And again, we've talked and brought up a lot recently how often Paul goes to application, and how that application is missing in a lot of our churches today. And so when the word is preached, it is preached almost as a contemplative exercise alone, something to ponder, something to pontificate upon. And a lot of our, frankly, mega churches in the suburbs on the Protestant side of things are just modern day monasteries where contemplation occurs. But like direct action upon which you've been taught is not asked for, let alone motivated. So here's one of those transition phrases right here as we start verse 12. So then, because of, you must, therefore, Paul uses a lot of these. Remember, he's an attorney. He's a lawyer. So he often will make cases on the preponderance of the evidence, and then he'll go for the verdict. He'll go for the close. All right? So then, brothers, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. Now, to be led by something, to show that you are being led by something, means that you must then be what? Let me pause there for a second. If someone is leading something, but I just sit still and stay behind, am I being led?
No, you aren't following.
I'm not following. I got it for me to be led means I need to be a what?
Follower.
A follower. That would be an action verb. To be led is not, I came to church, we got in and out in 43 minutes exactly because another service had to get in right after us, and I heard a pithy 26 or 27-minute sermon, and I saw the countdown clock. I could turn around and see the countdown clock that the pastor was watching with my own eyes because I knew exactly when it was going to end to make sure we were going to make the lunch appointment, get the kids in and out of the nursery. And that's not followership. At least not the kind that Paul is talking about here. I can promise you that. All right? For all who are led by the Spirit means you are following. That's what it means to be led. You are following the Spirit of God. That's what makes you a son of God. For you did not receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received the spirit of adoption as sons, by whom we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, right? Children can look forward to an inheritance from their parents. That's what it means to be an heir. Then heirs, heirs of God and fellow heirs with Christ.
Here it is.
Here it is. Exactly. Here it is. Another action transition. Provided we suffer with him in order that we may also be glorified with him.
You and your works-based righteousness, Steve.
So here's the thing. And this is what happens when you turn this into a contemplative exercise. you lack the application that demonstrates that you are a child of God. There has to be some form of evidence. And this is often a misunderstanding of the debate that Protestants and Catholics have over this. Neither side believes you don't have to bear any fruit whatsoever and can still consider yourself saved. No, any Protestant teacher who teaches that is a false teacher. I'm just telling you that right now. I mean, the entire standard that we are given is by their fruits you will know them. That's the entire standard we're given. Well, for there to be fruit means someone had to plant. That plant, that seed had to be watered, had to be nurtured. Planting, action verb. Nurtured, action verb. When those things are done, then there is a demonstration of a harvest, or it blossoms, or the fruit is demonstrable. Now the debate, this is not the time, we did this already in Romans 1:17. This is not the time, the debate is over the distinction of, do good works produce faith, or does faith produce good works? That's what the debate is about. But neither side of this argument believes you can just sit here and coast and have nothing really tangible to show for your faith at all. And be saved. That's not how this works at all. But in too many of American evangelical churches today, this is the kind of preaching that is happening. So when I looked through what Charles Spurgeon, my chosen tour guide, and he has preached on this portion of Romans numerous times, and so there are numerous sermon notes from these passages throughout Spurgeon's ministry. There was a common theme in all of them, and I have no idea which. I mean, he was in ministry for many years, so I mean, these are sermon notes from this passage of Scripture. How many times over the course of his life he preached on this, would be over the course of many years. But there was a common theme here. You have to be willing and probably have demonstrated some form of suffering to confirm your faith. If it didn't cost you anything, it's not worth anything, because it cost the Lord who gave it to you everything. It cost him everything.
Be perfect as he is perfect.
Correct. And it's what's also interesting is that this is Mr. Spurgeon saying this. If you know anything about his life, Spurgeon struggled with depression throughout much of his life. He had a life of very high highs, very low lows. In many respects, you could analogize Spurgeon to the prophet Elijah. Elijah has these like superhero kind of moments in the scriptures. But right after that, he can be prone to depression, frustration. So, and we're living in a period of time, if you're in the Matt Walsh crowd, and I don't blame you if you are, but if you're in the Matt Walsh crowd that now we have turned mental health into, a crutch and an idol. Well, Spurgeon is preaching in the 19th century where mental health just meant you were a wimp. You were weak. I mean, that was not something that was taken seriously, particularly in the Christian circles that he circulated in. So he is bearing this burden and suffering through this all of the time. But it's his willingness to suffer through it for the sake of the gospel that confirms his devotion to it. A lot of times, we win just, frankly, by persevering, by not quitting. We don't give up. I don't know how this is going to work out, man.
I will finish the race.
But I will finish the race. Thank you, Todd. I'm Rocky Balboa, man. It's round 8. It's round 9. It's round 10. Yeah. And I am Apollo Creed and Ivan Drago's punching bag. All right. And I've told Mick, cut me on both eyes. Okay. By the time we get to the last round, but we get to the last round. We get to the end. Sometimes there's nothing more to do other than to quote Michael Caine in The Dark Knight. Duh. There's nothing more to do other than that. But this is a teaching that is lacking from most of American evangelicalism today. I haven't heard a Catholic homily in many a moon, so I can't speak to what's going on Todd's side of the street. I'll let him do that. But on our side of the street, I have heard quite a bit of what's going on where we roll, where we hang out. I mean, yesterday when I went to have my glasses looked at, and I went into the strip mall where my optometrist was, there is a new church that had opened up in the same strip mall. And its tagline is, "Discover the champion in you." That is language you will find exactly nowhere. Genesis to Revelation. Any church father. Anyone from the apostolic era. That language is nowhere to be found. The Lord who gave us this faith was beaten to disfigurement, tortured to the point of death, and then brutally executed. The disciples who took the mantle from him after Pentecost, almost all of them suffered the exact same variation of a grim fate. We do not have this faith today that we are blessed to talk about because anybody discovered the champion in you or in themselves, but explicitly because they were willing to suffer for the cause. This country that we have inherited, we're here because 56 men signed onto a document whose closing words are, "We pledge our lives, fortunes, and sacred honors." Many of them were among the elite of colonial society, wealthy, men of skill, accomplishment, among the very first graduating classes of Ivy League, what we now call today Ivy League universities. By the time they were 18, they were willing to pay that price. Many of them did. They were willing to suffer for what they believed. We live in an era where we are coached by the culture to avoid suffering at all cost. One of the reasons why we got to celebrate with 4 generations of women at my house for Mother's Day last weekend is because my mom was willing to not listen to the culture. She wasn't a believer. She grew up in a white trash, godless household. And the supposedly Catholic family of my biological father that was urging her to have me murdered, she went to their priest at one point because she's a teenage girl. She doesn't understand. Why is this judge who, has, when I go into his offices, he's got every relic of the Catholic Church you could possibly imagine, and his kids all go to St. Anthony's School down the street. Why is he pressuring me to murder my kid and I don't want to do it? So she went to his priest and asked. The priest was like, yeah, they shouldn't be doing that. It's bad. It's wrong. If she had listened to the culture in the early morning, in the early hours after Roe versus Wade, I wouldn't be here today. Autumn wouldn't be here today. Anastasia wouldn't be here today. Zoe wouldn't be here today. Noah wouldn't be here today. She was willing to suffer on my behalf. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today. And those years that when I was a kid, small, little, she's a single mom, the things we went through sometimes in our home growing up after she got married, the suffering went on for many, many years. But now that my mom is 67 years old and gets to watch her great-grandbaby play on the floor of my family room, her son that she gave birth to, now that she's on the other side of it, now that she's close to the end of her race, I mean, I hope it's not next week, but, my mom's at the age where she ain't buying green bananas. She'd tell you that too. As she approaches the end of her race, she now realizes that it was worth it. She doesn't think about the suffering she went through on a random Thursday because she got abused in 1982. What she thinks about now is she sees the man that I've become, and she's proud of that. She sees the family that we have, and she is proud of that. She sees the adorable great-granddaughter she has, and she's delighted by that. Because she also realizes that none of this would exist if she had listened to the world. And if she wasn't willing to suffer. We do these ads for preborn because we've had such a great partnership with them for the last few years. And we talk about how difficult it can be to be a single mom today in 2025. What about in 1973, 1974? What was it like then? When, by the way, social stigmas for a woman to be pregnant and unmarried were still very much in place everywhere you went that don't exist today. Today, there's not even a social stigma about murdering your own kid, let alone being pregnant with one without a husband. So she had to endure the social stigmas of everything. She had to drop out of school, go back and get a GED. She was telling us the story because it was funny. We were sitting at dinner, and my mom and my wife and my daughter are all sharing delivery room stories, multi-generation delivery room stories. And I'm just sitting there, at the head of the table listening to all this. And my mom told me something I never knew, that her delivery room nurse just was completely awful to her because she was 15 and pregnant and unmarried. And she looked down on her and was just verbally abusive to her most of the time that she was in labor. Nowadays, we're literally on our knees begging young women not to murder their own children. So my mom not only went through the difficulty of the circumstance, but she had to endure the social stigma that went along with it that does not exist today. And we're like, listen, son, I'd love to go watch your Little League game, but, I've got my own game to watch because apparently I've never heard of a DVR. I can't watch it later. Now I get letters from people saying, hey, my sister is a nurse doing tranny surgeries, claiming she's a Christian. Should she be doing that? But here's the thing. Because we have turned the faith in many of our churches into a contemplative exercise with very little demanded application, even encouraged application, even application motivation. Very little sermons very few pastors today end a message with the first two words that Paul wrote here that we just cited. So then, in other words, here's what is now demanded of you. It is said of Calvin, it is said of John Calvin that he would preach, his sermons could at times go on. You'd have thought John Calvin was in a black church. Bring your Snickers, you're not going anywhere for a while. Because Calvin, it is said that Calvin would try to assume or presume the preemptive, or come up with the objections preemptively that his congregations would have to try to exempt themselves from his teaching, from what he was saying. And so he would sit there and there would be the sermon itself. The framework, what does it mean? Why does it matter? And then the rest of it would be like literally just applying it to people in specific situations, sitting in his own churches. Just wanted to make sure no one could walk out on a Sunday thinking, hey, this one wasn't about me. I'm good this week. I'm tiptoeing between the raindrops, baby. I'm walking on sunshine. Glad I'm not like that person next to me. So Calvin would try to he would try to imbue his sermons with preemptive objections he thought his congregations would have to call him out. We can't even get a "so then, brothers." We can't even get one of those in most of our churches today. And here's the thing, too. If it doesn't cost you anything, then you're reckless with something that you don't think costs you anything. You're not a good steward of things that you think. Think about how much you hated doing chores when your parents made you do them, and then how much you're willing to do it now that those are your things. That's your house. That's your furniture. You worked for that. You're invested in it now, directly. It cost you something, so it means something to you. This sort of costly Christianity, or costless Christianity, sufferless Christianity. It's cheap. You know, like it's you know, no one gets stressed out anymore when when their big screen TV goes out. Probably just go get a bigger one for even cheaper at Walmart in about 10 minutes. Walk out with it. Cheap grace, cheap goods, doesn't cost you anything. You don't value the things that don't cost you anything. You just don't. That's human nature. You value the things that do. And that suffering often that we're trying to avoid is actually a great blessing. Because from it is where the meaning of everything else we claim to believe ultimately comes from. I was watching my oldest daughter, Anastasia, do an interview on her podcast with one of her friends when she was involved in a Christian ministry trying to train young Christians on how to get into the entertainment industry and make an impact. And she's, for now, chosen the life of a mom and to not pursue that. But her friend, Danny, has. And he's actually out in Hollywood. And he just got done doing portraying Michael J. Fox, a young Michael J. Fox in a docudrama about his life. And he said something in this podcast to my daughter that really struck me. And he said, I was a homeschooled kid. I first moved out to California, and I'm 18, and it's the first time I'm out away from my family, and there's no one to check on me anymore. And let's just say I went through a period of time where my behavior was terrible. And I had to repent and walk away from that. And he goes, I now consider it a blessing that I get to be ashamed of that. I thought that was some really potent language. You know why I have no problem now in the aftermath of my marriage nearly falling apart, telling you about it? Because I endured that suffering and it didn't. And because I endured the suffering, God rewarded that endurance and he saved it. So now it's like showing you a trophy on my wall. I can't wait to share it and remind you guys, hey, we were on the brink of our family falling apart. Now we're having Mother's Days where 4 generations of people get together and celebrate each other. But if you just run away from every conflict, you try to dodge every form of suffering you might possibly endure, the minute something gets hard, it's a tap out. Whatever causes the least amount of suffering must be good. You end up in a world that looks more like a Diddy party than what a biblical worldview says. And that sometimes is the reward. That you were given the honor. The disciples, when Peter and John returned from the temple, one of the first times they bravely go back to the temple to preach Jesus as Messiah, and they are scourged by their fellow Jews who don't want to accept Yeshua as Messiah. And it says in the book of Acts, when they returned to the rest of the disciples, and I quote, they counted it all joy to suffer for the name. That's a quote. And that'll preach right there. But this is anathema to much of the modern preaching. Much of the preaching is a variation of that sign I saw in the strip mall yesterday. Discover the champion in you. Or it's just a benign form of that. The gospel as a construct. Feel bad about your sins once. Make your baptism video. Bring the family in to watch when you get dunked. And then about your way. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. And in fact, the way it works is from that point forward, so then happens over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. And the so thens don't stop. And the therefores and the now you musts don't stop until your heart does. That's when they stop. They stop then. Okay? So until your heart stops, the so then, brothers or sisters, don't stop. But in most American evangelical churches today, they don't even start. They don't even start. And that's why we are where we are. That's why we are where we are. Most of our ideas of suffering are a movie I was greatly looking forward to, got delayed by 6 months, and I have to wait longer for it. My favorite team didn't get the quarterback recruit that I wanted them to get. Or a quarterback got hurt in the middle of the year, so the season's over. Or my kid, who I'm confident is on his way to the NFL, isn't the starting quarterback for his peewee or high school team. That's suffering to us now. And that's why we're being made to suffer on systemic levels culturally because of such. This is why. People couldn't even suffer the inconvenience in many red states just to go vote in a primary every now and then. So you got Tom Tillis over and Lindsey Graham and John Cornyn and Charles Grassley over and over and over and over and over again. And you can't wait to email me and call your favorite podcaster or get on social media and lament and complain about it. Somebody's reelecting these guys 92% of the time. Somebody's doing it. In the end, you don't value anything that didn't cost you anything. And you were bought at a high price. The price of another man's life that he laid down for you. So assume, therefore, that you will be asked to pay some cost. It may not be as exuberant as his, but it will be something. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, we are powered by ourselves. Indeed, we are. If you love what you're hearing today, folks, we do all kinds of great exclusive content every day for you. I mean, Glenn's got a new Wednesday night special. I saw some clips of that yesterday, talking about the danger of debt and more. All of us do some form of regular exclusive content for subscribers here at Blaze TV. And now is a great time. You can get to Blaze TV for a year for just $8 a month. That's about what you're spending per day on those coffees you all love so much. All right, 26 cents a day, $20 off an annual subscription. Comes out to 26 cents a day, $8 a month. All right, when you use my promo code DACE at blazetv.com/DACE. That's blazetv.com/DACE. And you're going to do more than just get content. You're going to join a movement. All right, to save $20 right now with the code DACE at blazetv.com/DACE for Blaze TV, unfiltered, unafraid, and on demand. All right, gentlemen, I now turn it over to you. And Todd, I think we'll go to you first here to see what I need to make sure. I forgot this before. Dr. Scott Hahn has to say. give him the designate that he has rightfully earned, which I forgot about. So my bad.
Yeah, doesn't, as you can see, does it say doctor there? I mean,
no, but there are some Scott Hahn,
Guys.
Scott Hahnistas
Settle down
in this
over
audience
there.
that demand I recognize his
Them.
doctorship, right? So that all righteousness will be fulfilled, I have done so. All right, go ahead.
Well, when I read what Scott Hahn has to say, I'd like you to be thinking about that young man that Steve just got done talking about, that Anna interviewed on the show. Because I've talked about this before, and I don't know his particulars at all. Steve didn't tell us anything before or after about that, but I'm whether it's in a evangelical family or a Catholic family, I know kids like this. And they were taught the faith. They heard it regularly. It wasn't, it was real, tangible, important. But what they saw with their own eyes in relation to that is they saw parents who were always comfortable, not doing evil, but always comfortable. And that was a priority to them. And also never telling them in that faith that it's important. We are going to set up important lessons for you where you will be, as children, uncomfortable. You won't get a cell phone when mothers do. You will get a job and work for it that you don't like very much. You will have expectations placed on you like that. If they don't see that with their own eyes, sooner or later, whether consciously or not, they call BS on the whole thing. So I want you to remember that while we're talking about this, because I was going to talk about theory and application, and Steve laid it out perfectly. Scott Hahn says, our familial relationship with God is the controlling idea in this section of Romans. These are, first of all, theological concepts harvested from the scriptures. At the same time, talk of divine adoption must have resonated with readers immersed in Roman society, where adoption signaled entrance into a new family with all the privileges and duties of household membership attached thereto.
That's an important point.
This is all
that you are treated just as much as the natural born, because Paul's going to get to this later, what it means to be grafted in, right? Because we're being grafted into a covenant that originally began by the Jews or with the Jews. What does that mean? That's the metaphor of adoption. We have full benefits as if we were natural born children.
So this is the head knowledge, not only in terms of applying how this applies theologically, but why Paul was chosen, because he could speak to both sides of the fence. The Jews are going to get this theologically. The Romans are going to get this in terms of class status, things like this. But that's head knowledge. Now comes the application, the heart knowledge. Living as God's children means being led by the Spirit. And led is highlighted here because those are Paul's words, not Scott Hahn's. Children in a natural family are expected to love and honor their parents.
And again, if you're being led, that means you are following.
Yes.
Yes, you're not still. Yes.
And so it is in the family of God. The Spirit gives direction and inspiration from within so that believers can glorify the Father by their actions and choices. This means bearing the fruit of the Spirit. It means living as God the Son lived. Be perfect as I am perfect. For he, too, was led on his earthly journey by the Holy Spirit. In fact, it seems that Paul is thinking primarily about the role of the Spirit in enabling us to mortify the deeds of the flesh. This is not the first time we've talked about mortification. But it's not just sitting passively. Not doing evil requires activity. And it requires activity not just when we are immediately given the angel on the shoulder choice right in the immediate moment. It requires, and here's where sports analogies, the athlete. Are you going to show up to the main race when the gold is on the line and not have prepped yourself? That's insane. Of course not. Every day of life is a preparation for the race, for the challenge. You must, on a daily basis, be willing to die. Is that just fun?
Paul literally says,
yes.
I die daily.
Yes. Yeah. This is So what are you doing today? Fantasy football? Video games, toy lightsabers. I'm so sick of your act. It's not an act. It's this. You don't have a problem with me. You have a problem with God. You're too comfortable. Here we are.
I mean, I can add no Protestant edit to that other than to an amen. I mean, I can't agree with everything that was said there more. 100%.
Say a prayer for me because there's like 15 different directions we could go here. Got to keep my thoughts ordered as much as I possibly can, but that was very good, Todd. R.C. Sproul writes, reacting to verse 14, "For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are sons of God." Sproul says, if any biblical concept has been thoroughly muddled in our day, it is this concept of what it means to be led by the Spirit. A danger in the Christian community is that we devise and begin to use Christian jargon, and that jargon becomes the norm that defines our theology rather than the Word of God. The way in which our jargon functions in so many instances often has little relationship to how the same words are used in Scripture. With the enormous impact of the charismatic movement during the last century came the idea, this is Sproul's words, the idea of being led by the Spirit, which is why the concept figures largely in today's Christian jargon. And Sproul says, in some circumstances, it's okay to say being led by the Spirit in terms of physical, what decision do we need to be making, whether to take this job or that job, this decision or that decision. He says, we use the language being led by the Spirit to speak of concrete, specific guidance from God in which he opens or closes doors for us. There's nothing wrong with the idea that God leads his people where he wants them to go, into experiences that he wants them to experience, but that is not the primary biblical meaning of being led by the Spirit. Sproul says the primary question he hears more than any other from Christians, how can I know the will of God for my life? And he later answers and says, you cannot. Quit worrying about it because it's none of your business. If it were your business, it would not be the hidden will of God. God has chosen not to reveal certain things. Sproul says when the Bible speaks of the will of God for our lives, it does so very differently than what we hear from Christian jargon. For this is the will of God, your sanctification. 1 Thessalonians 4:3. If our lives are being directed by the Spirit, Sproul goes on to say, it is a sure and certain sign that we are children of God. Because that is what the indwelling Spirit does. He inclines our hearts. He gives us a hunger and a thirst for obedience. Obedience. Hunger for obedience to Christ. He gives us an affection by which we respond to Jesus' statement, if you love me, keep my commandments. John 14:15. Not know my commandments. Not memorize my commandments. Not recite my commandments. Keep my commandments. I want to restate or just re-say this. If our lives are being directed by the Spirit, it is a sure and certain sign that we are children of God, because that is what the indwelling Spirit does. He inclines our hearts. He gives us a hunger and thirst for obedience to Christ. Is a 100% biblical worldview placard, is that indicative of a hunger and thirst for Jesus, for obedience, I should say? Is being able to memorize Scripture, which is an important spiritual discipline and I think very, very helpful, but just that in and of itself, is head knowledge indicative necessarily of a hunger and thirst for obedience to Christ? No. It can be maybe an indicator of it, but it is not the indicator of it. It's not the foundation. Last night downstairs, it was around 10 o'clock at night. I was sitting there downstairs. Bella was up reading in bed. And I started hearing this really weird scratching sound, just a high-pitched scratching sound. And then it went away. And then it came back again. Like, what in the world is this? So I kind of went over to where I thought the sound was coming from, went into the downstairs bedroom. And there's a scratching sound at the window. Turned the light on. And over at the window was a baby bunny rabbit scratching. It had fallen into like the 4-foot egress window. I'm like, oh, good grief. So I just kind of didn't worry about it. It was 10 o'clock at night. Woke up this morning. I was about to turn on the car to go into work. Let me go save the frickin' bunny rabbit. So I went out, I got a bucket, got a rake, lowered the bucket down into the egress window, and holy cow, there was a terrible smell. A terrible smell. That baby rabbit was still alive, but one of his brothers was dead and decaying down there. Tried to save the baby, the living baby bunny rabbit. And it did not want to be saved. It did not want to. It was scared, didn't want to, kept trying to go hide behind its dead brother. Really morbid stuff. Eventually, though, I was able to get it into the bucket, pulled it out, and I got it out of the egress window, and I let it free, and it just ran off and took off. No, I had to dump it out of the bucket. It would not go anywhere. I saved it. I saved it from literal death and the stench of death around it from its own brother. It didn't want to be saved, but I saved it anyway. And it did not take off running. It was just shell-shocked or something. Now, this is an analogy, not a perfect analogy. But Sproul goes on to say, if I can find it here, verse 15, for you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. There's a contrast here between two kinds of spirits. One is the spirit of bondage, which is produced by the flesh. It's the spirit of the unregenerate person. Such people remain in prison. They are incarcerated by their old nature. They are slaves to the sinful impulses of their recalcitrant hearts. Kind of reminded me of that rabbit that didn't want to be saved. Didn't want to be saved. You were helpless. I came and saved you. And I set you out there. And your response is, I'm not going anywhere. However, Sproul writes, if we have the Spirit within us, we no longer have the spirit of bondage. We're no longer shaking and quaking in servile fear before the Lord God. We now have the spirit of adoption. And he gets into the idea of Abba, Father, and how sometimes that can be misused. Mm-hmm. But moving on.
It's a term of endearment.
It's a term of endearment.
But it's not some like touchy-feely.
It's not supposed to be used flippantly.
Yes, yeah. So it's an intimate term.
It's an intimate term that
but we use it like daddy. That's not what it means though either. Yeah.
No. But skipping ahead to verse 16, we are children of God. In the final analysis, which is one of R.C. Sproul's most famous terms, in the final analysis, our assurance of salvation is not a logical deduction springing from our theology. It's not head knowledge. Our assurance is certainly not based on careful analysis of our behavior. Put a bookmark in that. Our final analysis of assurance comes by the testimony of the Holy Spirit, who bears witness with and through our spirits that we are children of God. The Spirit bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs in verse 17, because all God's children participate in his estate, they are all his promised beneficiaries. If we are children, we are heirs of God. Continuing on in verse 17, joint heirs with Christ, if we indeed suffer with him. If we indeed suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. If you have faith, real faith, if you are justified, that will show in your actions. It's not just head knowledge. And we've had these conversations already before in Romans. But it couldn't be more clear there. And now to make Todd the Catholic really happy, what does that sound like? It sounds like James. First words out of James after the greetings. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete and lacking in nothing. There is an inextricable link. Again, these are the chicken or eggs arguments that we've had going back and forth between Protestant and Catholic. But don't let your head knowledge just be head knowledge. If you have a plaque like I have, that needs to be an indication of action, of change in your life, not just some sort of culmination of a test that you take. I don't think this can be reinforced enough. Because certainly I think it is the human condition that we avoid suffering at all costs. I think that's just an inescapable fact of human nature. But boy, howdy, we are in a culture right now where we don't even know what suffering is, most of us. Mm-hmm. Most of us. We have no freaking clue what suffering is. I mean, before you even said it, Steve, if I can try to wrap this up as quickly as possible. My idea of suffering, if we want to get really honest here, I can't get off at the exit that I usually take because they're completely changing 80-35 here, the interstate.
Right.
And then when I do get off
that is pretty annoying.
When I do get off at the exit that I have to take now, they're patching concrete everywhere. That's my idea of suffering. And guess what? If they weren't doing all that, guess what I would be suffering over? These roads suck. Because they're not patching the concrete and redoing all the that's the Americanized idea of suffering. Really, if we're being brutally honest here. Are we really willing to suffer? Are we really willing to do that? Because I'll just be completely honest in the last 30 seconds that we have here. When I take a look at the future of our country and the fiscal cliffs that we're heading towards, am I really ready to endure that? Do I really want to endure that? If I'm being totally honest, no. But if corporately we don't repent, that's what's going to happen, and a lot of people will suffer.
Yep. Kind of that whole revival or bust thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, we keep coming back to that, don't we, year after year. That's going to do it for today's Theology Thursday, today's program. Thank you guys for hanging in there and suffering along with us. All right, we're going to do overtime for Blaze TV subscribers. For the rest of you, we're back at it again tomorrow, noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck right here on Blaze TV. Until then, Romans 8:28.